They thought the party was theirs, a place of wealth, arrogance, and untouchable pride. But when a black woman walked into that glittering room, everything changed. Whispers turned to laughter, laughter turned to mockery. And what happened next would expose more than just cruelty. It would reveal how power truly works in America. Because the woman they dismissed wasn't just a guest. She held the future of their empire in her hands. And with one decision, she could bring it all crashing down. She wasn't new to luxury. Years of determination had turned her into a powerful businesswoman, respected in boardrooms where most never expected to see her face. To many, she was a symbol of resilience, grace wrapped in strength. That night, she arrived at the grand party not for the glitz, but for business. The deal she was finalizing could shift the future of an entire industry. She carried herself with quiet confidence, unaware that the very people smiling and shaking her hand were already whispering behind her back. To them, she was an outsider who didn't belong. But what they didn't realize was that beneath her calm presence, she carried the power to decide their fate. The music echoed through the mansion, crystal glasses clinked, and laughter spilled across the marble floors. At first, she blended into the crowd, moving with quiet confidence, her presence as polished as anyone else's. But as the night wore on, the whispers grew louder. A glance here, a smirk there, subtle enough to ignore until it wasn't. She caught the sting of a comment meant to slice through her dignity, a joke spoken just loudly enough for the group to hear, followed by cruel laughter. Their eyes scanned her, not as a guest, not even as a peer, but as an intruder who had crossed a line they believed should never be touched. She felt the weight of their stares, judging, mocking, daring her to react. Each remark sharpened the blade of humiliation, cutting deeper with every passing minute. It wasn't just about her dress, her presence, or even her success. No, it was about what she represented. To them, she didn't belong in their world of old money and inherited power, and they wanted her to know it. Still, she stood tall. Years of enduring subtle slights and overt prejudice had trained her to hold her composure. But inside, anger simmered. They thought her silence meant weakness. They thought she would swallow their cruelty and play the part of an unworthy guest. What they didn't know was that every laugh, every insult, was being quietly measured against the billion-dollar deal they desperately needed from her. The night spiraled further, mocking toasts, backhanded compliments, cruel eyes that followed her every step. One guest even whispered a comment about people knowing their place, sending another wave of laughter rippling through the room. Her chest tightened, her fists clenched at her side, but she gave nothing away. She smiled, faintly, nodded politely, as though she hadn't heard. Yet in that moment, a decision was forming, a decision that would shift the ground beneath their feet. And still they kept going, too blinded by arrogance to see the storm gathering in her silence. What they assumed was compliance was, in reality, the calm before impact. Because while they laughed at her expense, they had no idea that the very future of their empire was dangling by a thread. And she was holding the scissors. The laughter hit her like daggers, sharp, deliberate, impossible to ignore. One man raised his glass and, with a smirk, called her a guest of honor from the charity wing, sending the room erupting into cruel laughter. Another chimed in, mocking her presence as a diversity gesture, stripping her of every ounce of respect she had earned. The words echoed, louder than the music, louder than the chatter, louder than reason itself. For a moment, she felt the room closing in. The chandelier above shimmered like a spotlight. Every pair of eyes on her, waiting, expecting her to shrink, to retreat, to accept her place in the shadows they carved out for her. She could feel her chest tighten, her heartbeat pounding in, her ears. Years of struggle flashed before her eyes, the barriers she broke, the nights she spent proving herself in a world built to keep her out. And then, the shift happened. The humiliation they thought would crush her only hardened her resolve. She looked at the very people mocking her and saw the truth. They needed her more than she would ever need them. They laughed because they thought she was powerless. But, in reality, the billion-dollar deal they were clinging to was already hers to control. With steady grace, she lifted her head, her silence louder than their noise. In that instant, the power in the room shifted. What they thought was a victory of humiliation would soon turn into their greatest downfall, because the decision she was about to make, calm, deliberate, and irreversible, would cost them everything. By the next morning, the glitter of the party had faded, but its echoes lingered. While the billionaire family bragged about their wealth and mocked her presence, she quietly made her move. The deal they thought was already secured vanished. With one decision, she withdrew her support, unraveling the billion-dollar empire they had been counting on. Their arrogance had blinded them, and now the price was everything they once took for granted. For her, it wasn't about revenge. It was about dignity, about proving that no amount of money, power, or status could erase the truth. She had endured the humiliation, but she refused to let it. These same walls built to remind them they don't belong. Most don't have the power to walk away and make their oppressors feel the cost. And that's what makes this story bigger than one woman, one family, or one deal. It's a mirror, a reflection of how racism still thrives in spaces of power, privilege, and wealth. And it forces us to ask, how many more lives, careers, and futures must be diminished before we decide enough is enough? Because at the end of the night, the real question isn't about the billion they lost. It's about the humanity we all continue to lose when racism goes unchallenged.